Man, this is a very messed up thing for me to say. Now, by the way, pardon the noise, I'm outside. Hello, my name is Joshua Gilliam, and I have something very messed up to say, but it is rooted in truth and facts. And it's messed up to say, but I'm basically giving foresight to something that is already pretty obvious. Canada will not exist in the next 40 years. Canada will come to a conclusion. Canada will come to a conclusion. Canada will not be here anymore. Canada will not exist. The country north of the United States, that will just be an empty piece of land that First Nations occupy, just like it was hundreds of years ago. Canada is falling apart rapidly. It's dying, and if it's gonna die, let it die. It cannot be saved. Man, if you have stage 4 brain cancer, and stage 4 heart cancer, and stage 4 lung cancer at the same time, while having scurvy and the bubonic plague, you will not survive, man. It's less than 10% of a fraction of 1%. So let me tell you some reasons why Canada is gone. You see, it's been slowly declining, but COVID-19 was the knockout punch that will allow it to disappear. So first, okay, obesity. Canada is very obese. The average age of a Canadian is 40. So a lot of Canadians are gonna start to be on the verge of retirement, okay? Drug addiction, of course, Oxycontin, morphine, and fentanyl. Alcoholism, rampant everywhere, okay? Stupidity. You know what? They do a good job, grade 1 to 6. I'll give them that. They teach you how to read and write. But when it comes to giving you skills to build a career, grades 6 to 12 is a waste of time, college is a waste of time, and university will put you in debt until you pass away. That's how the banks like it. So basically, yeah, stupidity, that's a big one. Okay? Don't mind the sniffles, I am outside. But let me really get into the financial aspects. Canada's debt ratio was 80% before the pandemic occurred. Now it is about 105%. Canada has a negative debt ratio, okay? Above 100%. That means there's no longer any hope. You're running a deficit, and the liberals are running a deficit for no reason, because you're supposed to run a deficit for economic growth. So what if you go into debt to still have a failing economy? That means you're a waste of time. So Canada will die. There's no hope for Canada. Okay? Now, look at the housing market. You have a dipping birth rate. So as your birth rate is dipping, there's less people that are even at the age to really cover a 30-year home loan. There are not really working class people like that, as you have a older average age. You're on the verge of retirement. So guess what? Your housing market is a joke. You're raising house prices. You're just feeding off of your overinflated dollar, and the Canadian dollar is nothing. The Canadian dollar is a debt relief token. The Canadian dollar is a debt relief token. It's not real currency. And that's part of the reason why Canada's dipping. You don't have anything to fall back on. The Middle East has some oil. Africa, of course, has the cobalt and the nickel and the copper and the vast amounts of farmland, okay? Britain, they have some nice banks, some architecture, whatever. So Canada has nothing to rely on. You have a debt relief token that is rapidly dying as inflation beats a 40-year record. So, yes, you are done and dusted and you're dead. Canada is falling apart. It's falling apart. I'm just telling you the facts, man. You see, your birth rate is not even 2 children per woman. It's like a 1.47 children per woman. So that means more people are dying than being born. Immigration won't solve it. A lot of immigrants that come over, such as Indian and Chinese, are not planning on having children either, and they're not much younger than you, so they're on the verge of retirement. Africans and Caribbeans included. So you're basically, by adding immigrants, you're just adding to your debt ratio, which is crumbling your country. Because how has immigration saved you? You've been doing immigration for some decades now, and the only thing you have to show for it is more insolvency. Half of Canadians are on the brink of insolvency, and half of Canadians are already in insolvency. They have nothing. They have a failing economy. No one wants to admit that if you have a home in a city that's losing population, yeah, your home value is losing its equity. Of course, if you bought your house for 300,000, you have a city population of 100,000. If half the people leave because more people are dying than being born because you have a birth rate that's below replacement, that means your home is worth like 250,000. So Canadians have negative equity, but you rather overinflate the economy to the point where a townhouse is 1.5 million to give yourself the impression that you're going up in value when really a home in Canada isn't worth anything because you can't back it with anything. Your labor force is nothing, and that's why Americans can buy you out. That's why Burger King and McDonald's and Amazon can crush Canadian business, because Canadian business is so restrictive, so rooted in socialism to the point where it turns into a makeshift fascism that you can't accomplish nothing. So yes, Canada, you're a failure. You tax people at 30% while not giving them a livable wage. You make sure that their cost of living is above their wages, so you can't go and do nothing. You run a deficit until you pass away. Now, of course, if you live in the States, yes, you will probably die in debt, yes, but does it have to be that bad? If you really, really wanted to have a great financial path in terms of just having hard liquid savings, you could move from a place from California where you're renting to a place like Nebraska and own your stuff outright if you're really desperate to get in the market as soon as possible. But Canada, from coast to coast, from Hurricane Fiona, which messed up a little bit of Newfoundland and Nova Scotia, to BC, which has some wildfires from time to time, from coast to coast, no, your housing market is a failure. Everything you're doing is a failure. So Canada will not exist, man. And you know what? Most people know Canada is a dying country. That's why they don't produce children. If you have faith in the economy, you produce children because you think you're giving them a great future to buy into. If you don't have children, that means you don't have faith in the future, so you're not creating the next generation of workers and home buyers and mothers and whatever. Canada will die a very painful death. You see, the way the country was founded, doing genocide to First Nations, pushing them off their land, now, through your own economic stupidity and political undoing, you will cause yourself to be pushed off the land, and Canada will revert to just some First Nations occupying some land by the lakes and stuff. So yes, Canada will not exist. This is not hate speech, bro. All the metrics I have pointed to are correct. Insolvency, the debt ratio increasing, birth rate going down, immigration just adding to the amount of poor people. More people doesn't mean better economy. More people, if you don't use it correctly, just means concentrated poverty, okay? That's why some of the most poorest countries have some of the biggest populations. It's just a lot of people being abused and they don't know what to do. Okay, so yes, and I know you're thinking, well, there's Pierre Poilievre, who is a strong right-wing conservative guy. He's coming in too late, bro. Bro, Pierre, his impact would have been good if he was running when Stephen Harper was in office. You know, like if he was going against Stephen Harper, he would have time to recover, or should I say, he would have time to put Canada on a decent path. Justin Trudeau, you allowed him to destroy Canada. Stephen Harper wasn't doing an amazing job. John Chrétien was not doing an amazing job. And now you see, why do you think Quebec wanted to break away in 1995? It's not all about the French language. It's not all about French culture. Quebec, they moderate themselves. I'm not even talking about moderate as in political. I'm talking about they moderate themselves as in they don't run into too much deficit. They don't overspend too much. They're very analytical in the decisions they make financially, real estate, banks, all that. They're not as dumb as, you know, frankly, Anglophone Canadians that overspend and do all this stupid stuff. So I think Quebec wanting to break away and make a 1995 referendum was more financial than even based on French culture. And now you're seeing, wow, it was kind of smart for them to think like that. Because just a few decades later, what do you see? Canada is on the verge of not existing. Canada is falling apart rapidly. You see, you can't even walk down the street without someone hassling you or giving you a hand gesture, a fake gesture, or calling you out your name because people are getting a bit psychotic and they're getting crazy. Because Canadians are used to being poor. Usually they have enough money to splurge with, right? But they know that I'm probably going to die in debt. I'm probably don't have a good financial future. But this little bit of spending cash that I do have allows me to block out the horrible financial, political, and social condition that I'm put in. Now that Canada is collapsing, it will collapse rapidly. It's going to be intense. You see, Canada has an immigration backlog of 2.5 million, so they're blocking out people from coming into the country. And you know what? I think not only will people be blocked out, people will be pushed out. Like people that are already here, that haven't been here for long, are going to get pushed out. Because the labor force is going to collapse. Are you kidding me? Automation, robots doing these simple jobs. Automation, first of all, you're in a recession, so spending isn't really happening like that. And a lot of people are on the verge of retirement. The average age of a Canadian is 40. So most Canadians are obese. So that's basically a 50-year-old. If you're 60, unless you have an office job, you're retired. So really, you have a bunch of makeshift 50-year-olds that have about 10 years left before they fall off and they're finished. Man, this has been my report of Canada. This is why Canada will not exist. Canada might have had a little bit of hope. They might have been on the rise, 1950s, strong Canadian dollar, Tommy Douglas, free healthcare, he was trying, but Canada is on the verge of extreme failure, annihilation, and extinction. It will not be here.